I've never been good at taking pictures. My friends used to joke that I could make a sunset look like a crime scene and a birthday party look like a hostage situation. I laughed along because it was true. I had a knack for catching people mid-blink, for tilting horizons just enough to make you seasick. Photography was never my thing. That's why, when I bought the camera, I didn't expect much. I thought maybe I'd finally learn how to frame a shot, maybe post something half-decent online for once. I didn't expect this. The photo is still on my desk. I haven't touched it since I printed it, but I can feel it there, like it's breathing. I keep it face down, because if I look at it too long, I start to hear things. It's a picture of me. That's the first wrong thing. I didn't take a selfie. I was testing the camera in my apartment, pointing it at the bookshelf across the room. I remember the click, the whir of the shutter, the faint chemical smell of the print developing. I remember thinking it was strange that the photo came out so fast. And then I saw it. I'm in the frame, standing in the middle of my living room, my back to the camera. My head is tilted slightly, like I'm listening to something. The lighting is wrong, too dim, too cold, like the bulbs had been replaced with something that hummed. But that's not the part that makes my stomach knot. Behind me, just over my shoulder, there's a figure. It's tall, impossibly so, its head nearly brushing the ceiling. The shape is human, but stretched, as if someone had pulled it like taffy. Its face, if you can call it that, is a blur, a smear of pale light where features should be. And its hands are resting on my shoulders. I live alone. My apartment door was locked. I remember the way my skin prickled when I saw it, the way my breath caught in my throat. I turned around so fast I nearly tripped over the coffee table, scanning every corner, every shadow. Nothing. Just the quiet hum of the fridge and the faint buzz of the ceiling light. I told myself it was a trick of the lens, a double exposure, some weird reflection. But the longer I stared, the more I noticed. The way the figure's fingers seemed to sink into my skin, the way my posture in the photo looked wrong, like I was leaning into its grip. I haven't shown the picture to anyone. Not because I'm afraid they won't believe me, but because I'm afraid they will. And here's the thing. I wish I could tell you that was the worst thing this camera showed me, but it wasn't. Stay with me. You need to hear the rest. I wasn't looking for a camera that day. Honestly, I wasn't looking for anything at all. It was one of those lazy Saturdays where you wander without purpose, letting the streets decide where you end up. That's how I found myself in front of a pawn shop I'd never noticed before. A squat, brick building wedged between a boarded-up laundromat and a vape store that always smelled faintly of burnt sugar. The sign above the door was sun-bleached and peeling, the letters barely legible, Harlan's Curiosities and Repairs. The kind of place that looked like it might sell you a toaster from 1973 or a cursed amulet in the same breath. Inside, the air was thick with dust and something sharper, a faint tang, like the air before a lightning storm. The shelves were a chaotic museum of forgotten lives, cracked porcelain dolls, stacks of vinyl records, tarnished silverware. And there, on a glass shelf near the back, sat the camera. It was an old model, the kind you'd expect to see in a black and white photo of a tourist in the 1960s. Boxy, with a leather strap that looked worn but intact. The metal casing was scuffed, but the lens caught the light in a way that made it seem deeper than it should be, like staring into a dark well. I picked it up and immediately noticed two things. It was heavier than it looked, and it was warm. Not room temperature warm, body warm, like it had been sitting in someone's hands just moments before. "Ah," a voice said behind me. "You found it." I turned to see the shop's owner, a thin man with a face like crumpled paper and eyes that didn't quite match in color. He moved slowly, like each step was a decision. "It's temperamental," he said, as if that explained anything. "Temperamental?" I asked, turning the camera over in my hands. He shrugged. "Some things don't like to be used the wrong way. That one's particular, about perspective." I laughed, because what else do you do when a stranger says something like that? "Does it work?" "Oh, it works," he said, and for a moment his mismatched eyes seemed to focus on something far away. "Just be careful what you point it at." I should have put it back. I should have walked out. But there was something about the weight of it in my hands, the faint smell of ozone clinging to the leather strap, the tiny scratch on the lens that, I swear, looked like the outline of an eye. "How much?" I asked. He named a price that was absurdly low. I paid in cash. He wrapped the camera in brown paper, but not before giving me one last look, the kind of look you give someone who's about to step into traffic. Back in my apartment, I set the camera on the coffee table and just stared at it for a while. It looked harmless enough. Ordinary, even. But every time I glanced away, I had the strange feeling it had shifted slightly, like it was angling itself toward me. Eventually, curiosity won. I loaded the film the shop owner had thrown in a few rolls on the house, and decided to take a test shot. My living room was as good a subject as any. I lifted the camera, framed the bookshelf in the viewfinder, and pressed the shutter. The click was louder than I expected, followed by a faint hum that seemed to vibrate in my teeth. The print slid out, warm and smelling faintly metallic. I shook it gently, more out of habit than necessity, and waited for the image to appear. When it did, my stomach tightened. The bookshelf was there, just as I'd framed it. But in the far corner of the room, where I knew there was only a blank stretch of wall, something else had appeared. A shadow, tall, thin, and leaning just slightly toward the camera. At first, I told myself it was nothing. Cameras mess up all the time, right? Light leaks, dust on the lens, weird reflections. It's part of the charm of old tech. That's what I kept repeating to myself after that first shadow in the corner. Still, I couldn't shake the itch in the back of my mind. So, the next day, I decided to take a few more test shots. Just to prove to myself it was a fluke. The first one was of my kitchen. I framed the shot so the counter and the little window above the sink were in view. When the print slid out, I noticed something odd. There was a chair in the corner. A tall, high-backed wooden chair. My kitchen doesn't have chairs, it's too small. I even walked over to the corner, half expecting to find one there. Nothing. Just the same scuffed linoleum and a faint smell of coffee from the morning. I laughed it off. "Congratulations," I muttered to the camera. "You're officially the world's first haunted Polaroid." The next shot was of my hallway. I wanted to see if the weirdness would repeat. The photo developed slowly, the colors bleeding into each other before settling. And there it was, a door. Not my front door, not the bathroom door, a third door, right in the middle of the wall. It was painted a dull, peeling green, with a tarnished brass knob. I stared at it for a long time, tracing the edges with my finger. In real life, that wall is solid plaster. I started to notice a pattern. The anomalies only showed up when I took photos in certain lighting, dim, indirect light, like late afternoon or early evening. Bright daylight shots came out perfectly normal. It was almost like the camera needed shadows to work its magic? Curse? Whatever it was. I kept testing. The living room again. This time, a small table appeared beside the couch, holding a vase of dead flowers. My bedroom, a cracked picture frame on the wall, showing a landscape I didn't recognize, a field under a black sky. Each time, I checked the spot in real life. Each time, nothing was there. I started joking about it in my head, like I was in on some private prank. What's next? I'd say to the camera. A ghostly ottoman? A spectral beanbag chair? But underneath the humor, there was a growing unease. Because the objects weren't random. They felt placed. Like someone was decorating a room I couldn't see, one photo at a time. One evening, I set the camera on the coffee table and just stared at it. The leather strap lay coiled like a sleeping snake. The lens caught the lamplight, and for a moment, I thought I saw movement inside it. A flicker like something shifting in the dark. I told myself I was imagining it. I had to be. Still, I couldn't stop. The more anomalies appeared, the more I wanted to see what would come next. It was addictive, in a way, like peeling back layers of wallpaper to see what's underneath. Then came the shot that made me pause. It was another of the living room, taken from the same angle as the very first photo. The bookshelf was there, the couch, the coffee table. And in the far corner, the same corner where the shadow had been, there was now a chair. The same high-backed wooden chair from the kitchen photo. Only this time, it wasn't empty. Not a person. Not yet. Just the impression of one. A faint indentation in the seat cushion, as if someone had just stood up. I stared at it for a long time, my mouth dry. The air in the room felt heavier, like the moment before a storm breaks. I told myself it was still harmless. Just a glitch. Just a trick of the light. But deep down, I knew the camera was building towards something. And whatever it was getting closer. It happened on a Wednesday night. I remember because I just finished microwaving leftover pasta and was halfway through convincing myself that eating it straight from the container didn't make me a degenerate. The camera was sitting on the coffee table, angled toward me like it was waiting. I don't know why I picked it up. Maybe it was boredom, maybe it was that gnawing curiosity that had been building since the first glitches. Either way, I lifted it, framed the shot on my living room, the bookshelf, the couch, the far corner, and pressed the shutter. The click was followed by that faint hum again, the one that seemed to vibrate in my teeth. The print slid out, warm against my fingers. I shook it gently, watching the image bleed into existence. At first, it looked normal. The bookshelf, the couch, the coffee table. But then my eyes drifted to the far corner. There was someone there. A figure, blurred but unmistakably human, standing just inside the frame. Tall, maybe 6 feet, with shoulders hunched forward. The head was tilted slightly, as if they were studying me. The face was indistinct, not blurred like a bad photo, but smeared, like wet paint dragged across a canvas. I froze. My apartment door was locked. I live alone. I set the photo down and turned toward the corner in real life. Empty. Just the same blank stretch of wall, the same faint shadow from the lamp. My pulse was hammering in my ears. I checked the locks. I checked the closet. I even looked under the bed, which felt ridiculous, but I had to. Nothing. I told myself it was a trick of the light, maybe a reflection from the TV screen. But the TV was off. I needed someone else to see it. I snapped a picture of the photo with my phone and sent it to my friend Mark. He's the kind of guy who thinks every horror movie could be solved with, just leave the house, and buy a gun. A minute later, my phone buzzed. Mark, probably a reflection. You've got that big window, right? Me. The blinds were closed. Mark, then maybe it's you, like a double exposure or something. Me. I was behind the camera. Mark. Dude, it's nothing. Stop creeping yourself out. I stared at his last message for a while. It was the kind of dismissal I'd expected, but it didn't make me feel any better. If anything, it made the silence in my apartment feel heavier. I put the photo in a drawer and tried to forget about it. That night, I woke up to the sound of breathing. It was faint, almost imperceptible at first, like the sound you hear when you're half asleep and not sure if it's real. But the longer I lay there, the more certain I became. It wasn't my breathing. It was slower, deeper, coming from somewhere near the foot of the bed. I didn't move. My eyes were open, but I didn't dare look. I just lay there, counting the seconds between each inhale and exhale. And then it stopped. I don't know how long I stayed frozen like that, but eventually, exhaustion won. When I woke up, sunlight was streaming through the blinds, and the room was empty. I told myself it was a dream. It had to be. But when I walked into the living room, the camera was sitting on the coffee table again, angled toward the far corner. I could have sworn I'd left it in the drawer with the photo. I stood there for a long time, staring at it. My skin prickled, the way it does when you know you're being watched. That's when I decided I needed to know. No more accidental shots, no more pretending it was just a glitch. I was going to test the camera. Deliberately. I wanted to see what would happen if I kept pointing it at the same place. And I had a feeling the figure in the corner was just getting started. Once I decided to test the camera, I knew I couldn't just keep shooting inside my apartment. If there was something wrong with it, or with me, I needed to see if it happened everywhere. I started small. The park down the street. It was late afternoon, the kind of light the camera seemed to like. Long shadows, gold bleeding into gray. Kids were playing on the swings, a couple walked their dog, a man in a baseball cap fed pigeons. I lifted the camera, framed the shot, and clicked. When the print slid out, the park was there. But so were 5 people I hadn't seen. They stood scattered across the grass, all facing the camera. Their clothes were wrong for the season. Heavy coats in the warm air, hats pulled low. None of them were moving. I looked up from the photo. The swings creaked, the couple laughed, the man tossed crumbs. No coats. No hats. No still, staring strangers. I told myself I'd missed them somehow, that they'd walked away in the seconds between the shot and me looking up. But the hair on my arms was standing on end. Next, I took the subway. Rush hour, bodies pressed together, the air thick with heat and the smell of metal. I snapped a photo of the crowded car, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. The print developed slowly, the colors muted. The passengers were there, but so were others. Pale, blurred figures standing in the aisles, their faces turned toward me. One of them was leaning over a seated passenger, mouth open as if whispering into their ear. The passenger didn't react. I shoved the photo into my bag and got off at the next stop. The third location was an abandoned building on the edge of town, an old textile mill, windows boarded, graffiti curling across the brick. Inside, the air was damp and smelled of rust. My footsteps echoed in the empty space. I took 3 shots in quick succession, moving through the main floor. The first photo showed the room as it was, empty, except for a few broken chairs. The second showed the same room, but now there were people in it. Dozens of them, standing shoulder to shoulder, all facing the camera. Their eyes were black smudges, their mouths thin lines. The third photo made my stomach drop. The crowd was gone, except for one figure. Tall, thin, shoulders hunched, head tilted slightly, as if studying me. It was the same figure from my apartment. I flipped back through the other photos, the park, the subway, the mill, and there it was, in each one. Sometimes in the background, sometimes closer. Always facing the camera. Always facing me. I don't know how I hadn't noticed it before. Maybe I hadn't wanted to. By the time I got home, the sun had set. My apartment felt smaller, the shadows heavier. I spread the photos out on the coffee table, lining them up in order. The figure was closer in each one, the tilt of its head more pronounced, like it was leaning in to hear something. I sat there for a long time, staring at them. My mouth was dry, my hands cold. There was one test I hadn't done yet. One I'd been avoiding. I wanted to see what would happen if I turned the camera on myself. Not a selfie. I'd set it up on a tripod, or maybe use the mirror. I wanted to see if the figure would still be there when I was the subject. Part of me hoped it wouldn't work, that the camera only showed what was in front of it, not what was behind. But another part, the part that had been pulling me deeper into this since the first shadow, wanted to know. Because if the figure was behind me in those photos, I needed to see how close it really was. I set the tripod up in my bedroom, angling it toward the full-length mirror on the wall. The glass was old, a little warped, the kind that makes you look taller or thinner depending on where you stand. I'd bought it second-hand years ago, never thinking it would be anything more than a place to check if my shirt matched my pants. The camera sat on the tripod like it belonged there, lens aimed directly at my reflection. I stood in front of the mirror, arms at my sides, face neutral. I wanted the shot to be as plain as possible. No movement, no expression, nothing that could be mistaken for a trick. Click. The print slid out, warm and humming faintly. I waited for the image to develop, my eyes flicking between the photo and the mirror. When the picture cleared, my stomach tightened. In the photo, I was smiling. Not a small, polite smile. A wide, toothy grin that stretched too far, pulling at the corners of my mouth in a way that made my jaw ache just looking at it. My eyes were wrong too, wide open, pupils dilated, like I just heard the funniest joke in the world, or seen something I shouldn't have. I glanced at the mirror. My reflection was still neutral, still me. I told myself it was a glitch, maybe a double exposure from some old photo burned into the film. But then the reflection moved. Not in the photo, in the mirror. It tilted its head slowly, the grin widening, teeth catching the light. My own face stayed still, frozen in shock, but the reflection took a step forward. The glass didn't ripple or crack, it was like watching someone walk toward you through a window. I stumbled back, my heel catching on the edge of the rug. The reflection kept moving until its face was inches from the glass, eyes locked on mine. The grin never faltered. I don't know how long we stared at each other. My breathing was shallow, my pulse loud in my ears. Then, without breaking eye contact, the reflection lifted its hand and pressed it against the inside of the mirror. I didn't move. It leaned closer, so close that its breath, if it had breath, should have fogged the glass. But the surface stayed clear, cold, and solid. And then it mouthed something. I couldn't hear it, but I could read the shape of the words. I see you. That broke me. I grabbed the nearest thing, a heavy book from the nightstand, and hurled it at the mirror. The glass shattered, pieces skittering across the floor. My reflection fractured into a dozen jagged shards, each one still grinning. I stood there, chest heaving, surrounded by the glittering wreckage. The camera was still on the tripod, lens aimed at the broken mirror. I don't know why I did it, but I pressed the shutter. The print slid out, warm and humming. I didn't want to look, but I had to. The photo showed me standing in front of the mirror, whole, unbroken, and behind me, in the reflection, was the grinning figure. Closer than before. I don't know what I was hoping to find. Maybe a manufacturer's manual, some dusty collector's blog explaining the quirks of old cameras. Something rational. Something that would make all of this make sense. Instead, I found a trail. It started with the serial number, etched faintly into the metal baseplate. I typed it into a search engine, expecting nothing. But buried 3 pages deep in the results was a thread on an old photography forum, the kind that hadn't been updated in years. The first post was from 2009. A user named Shutterghost had uploaded a blurry photo of a camera identical to mine, serial number and all. Their caption read, "Inherited this from my uncle. Anyone know why it takes pictures of things that aren't there?" The replies were half jokes, half curiosity, until one caught my eye. A user named Glass Eye had written, "Don't photograph the same place twice." No explanation. No follow-up. Just that. I scrolled further. The thread ended abruptly a few days later, with Shutterghost posting, "Something's wrong. I think someone's in my house." No one replied after that. I kept digging. The serial number popped up again in an archived news article from 1987. A local man had been found dead in his apartment, cause of death undetermined. The accompanying photo, grainy, black and white, showed police carrying out a boxy camera with a leather strap. Another hit, a classified ad from 1974. Vintage camera for sale. Works perfectly. Unique results. The seller's name matched the victim in the 1987 article. The deeper I went, the more the pattern emerged. Every owner I could trace had died suddenly, mysteriously. Some were ruled accidents, others never explained. And in every case, the camera changed hands quietly, slipping from estate sales to pawnshops to private collectors. One blog post from 2015 stopped me cold. It was written by someone calling themselves Negative Space. They claimed the camera was one of several, a set, they called it, each with its own specialty. Mine, they said, reveals what's already there, but hidden. Another supposedly showed what's coming. Another, what's been erased. The post ended with a warning, if you have one, you're already in the picture. I leaned back in my chair, the glow of the laptop screen painting the room in cold light. My hands were clammy. I thought about Glass Eye's warning, don't photograph the same place twice. And then it hit me. I'd already done it. The living room. The far corner. The bookshelf. I'd photographed it over and over, chasing the changes, watching the figure get closer. I closed the laptop, but the words from that forum thread kept looping in my head. Don't photograph the same place twice. Too late. I glanced toward the coffee table. The camera was sitting there, angled toward me. The lens caught the light, and for a moment, I thought I saw movement inside it, a flicker, like someone shifting in the dark. I told myself I'd stop. No more photos. No more feeding whatever this was. But deep down, I knew I wasn't done. Because part of me needed to know what would happen next. I didn't want to believe it, but the evidence was right there on my coffee table. I'd spread the photos out in a neat line, thinking maybe I'd spot some detail I'd missed before. What I saw instead made my stomach knot. The living room. The same angle. The same far corner. Over and over again. In the earliest shots, the corner was empty, or almost empty. A shadow here, a chair there. Then came the faint outline of a person, blurred and distant. In the next, they were clearer, their head tilted in that same unnatural way. And then closer, and closer. By the most recent photo, the figure wasn't in the corner anymore. They were standing in the middle of the room, just behind the couch. Behind where I'd been sitting when I took the picture. I picked up that last photo, my fingers trembling. The figure's face was still smeared, but the shape of the body was sharp now. Tall, thin, shoulders hunched. Their hands hung at their sides, fingers too long, like they'd been stretched. I glanced over my shoulder, half expecting to see them there. Nothing. Just the quiet hum of the fridge in the kitchen. I thought about the warning from that old forum. Don't photograph the same place twice. I'd broken that rule without even realizing it. And now they were inside. I flipped through the stack again, my pulse quickening. In each photo, the figure's posture shifted slightly, their head angling toward me, their body leaning forward. It was like watching someone walk toward you frame by frame. And then I saw it. In the very last photo, the one I'd taken just yesterday, the figure wasn't behind the couch anymore. They were right behind me. I could see the back of my own head in the shot, my shoulders tense, the camera raised. And there, looming over me, was the figure. So close their blurred face was almost touching my hair. I dropped the photo like it had burned me. It landed face down on the table. The apartment felt smaller suddenly, the air heavier. Every creak of the floorboards, every faint shift of the building made my skin crawl. I told myself I'd stop. No more photos. No more feeding whatever this was. But even as I thought it, I knew it was a lie. Because if they were already this close, I needed to know what would happen when they finally arrived. It was just past 2 a.m. when I woke up. No reason, no nightmare, no noise loud enough to explain it. Just that sudden, sharp awareness that something isn't right. The apartment was silent. Too silent. Even the hum of the fridge seemed to have gone still. I lay there, staring into the dark, telling myself to go back to sleep. Then I heard it. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate, somewhere out in the living room. The kind of sound that makes your body go cold before your brain catches up. I held my breath, straining to listen. The steps were soft, but the floorboards in this building have a way of betraying anyone who walks on them. They creaked, one after another, moving in no hurry at all. I told myself it was the neighbors, maybe sound carrying through the walls. But the steps were too close, too distinct. They were inside. I reached for my phone on the nightstand, but froze halfway. From the living room came a sound I hadn't heard before, a mechanical click, followed by a faint whir. The camera. I hadn't touched it since the last photo. It was still on the coffee table, pointed toward the couch. I knew that sound, the shutter, the feed of the print sliding out. But I was in bed. Alone. The whir stopped. Silence again. I don't know how long I lay there, staring at the ceiling, my heart pounding. Eventually, I forced myself to move. I got up, every step toward the living room feeling heavier than the last. The camera was sitting exactly where I'd left it. A fresh print lay face down beside it. I didn't want to look. Every instinct told me to leave it there, to walk away. But my hands moved on their own. I picked it up. It was a photo of me. I was asleep in my bed, the blankets pulled up to my chest. My face was turned slightly toward the camera, mouth slack in the way you never want to see yourself. And surrounding the bed, 6 figures. They stood in a loose circle, their bodies angled toward me. Some were tall, some hunched, their faces all blurred into the same pale smear. Their hands hung at their sides, fingers too long, too thin. One of them was the figure I'd seen in every photo. The tall one, shoulders hunched, head tilted, standing at the foot of the bed. I felt my knees weaken. My bedroom door had been closed when I went to sleep. I dropped the photo onto the table, my hands shaking. The air in the apartment felt wrong, thick, heavy, like it was pressing against my skin. I backed away from the camera, from the photo, from the living room itself. My mind was racing, trying to find an explanation, any explanation that didn't involve what I already knew. I couldn't keep it anymore. I couldn't let it keep whatever it was doing. I didn't waste time. The moment I decided, I grabbed the camera off the coffee table and carried it to the kitchen. My hands were shaking so badly, I nearly dropped it before I even started. The first blow came from a hammer. The metal casing dented under the strike, but the lens didn't crack. I hit it again, harder, until the hammer's head rang with the impact. The camera just sat there, dented but intact, like it was absorbing the hits. I took it outside, down to the alley behind my building. There was an old metal barrel there, half filled with ash from someone's bonfire. I doused the camera in lighter fluid and set it alight. The flames licked at the leather strap, blackening it, curling the edges. I stood there until the fire burned itself out, the smell of scorched metal and chemicals hanging in the air. When I reached in, the camera was warm, but whole. Not a single piece melted. Panic was starting to edge out reason. I walked 3 blocks to the river, the streets empty and echoing under the streetlights. I hurled the camera into the black water and watched it sink without a splash. I stayed there for a long time, the cold air biting at my skin, until I convinced myself it was gone. When I got back to my apartment, it was sitting on my desk. Dry, undamaged, and there was a photo sticking out of it. I didn't want to touch it, but my eyes kept dragging back to the white border, the faint image already bleeding into view. I slid it free with numb fingers. It was a picture of me. Not now, tomorrow. The timestamp in the corner read September 4th, 2025, 2:17 a.m. In the photo, I was lying in bed, eyes closed, the blankets pulled up to my chest. And standing over me, closer than ever, was the tall figure. Its head was tilted, its blurred face hovering inches from mine. I set the photo down, my pulse hammering in my ears. Tomorrow was only hours away. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the timestamp on that last picture, the one marked for tonight, ticking closer in my mind. By 2:15 a.m., I was sitting on the edge of my bed, the camera on the desk across the room. I kept glancing at the clock, my pulse sinking with the seconds. At 2:17, the shutter clicked. I hadn't touched it. The whir of the print sliding out filled the silence, louder than it had any right to be. My body felt heavy, like moving toward it was the worst decision I could make. But I did. The photo was warm in my hand. The image bled into view slowly, like it was savoring the moment. It was me. Not sleeping. Not breathing. I was lying on my bed, eyes half-lidded, skin pale and slack. My mouth hung slightly open, and there was a stillness to the body. My body, that I could feel in my bones. And standing beside the bed was the figure. Closer than ever. For the first time, its face wasn't blurred. It wasn't a smear of light or shadow. It was wrong. Too symmetrical, too smooth, like a mask stretched over something that didn't quite fit. And in its hands, it was holding the camera. The lens was pointed down at me. I stared at the photo until my vision blurred. My chest felt tight, my breath shallow. I looked up at the desk. The camera was still there, angled toward me. I don't remember sitting back down. I don't remember picking up my phone. But I know I'm recording this now, speaking directly to you, because there's something you need to understand. If you're watching this, it means the photo was right. And if you've ever seen that figure, in a photo, in a reflection, in the corner of your eye, you need to tell me. Leave a comment. Share it. Because if it's in your pictures too, it's already closer than you think.